Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Hogarth's Global Astrology. Know your planets, know yourself, or know your nation, know yourself. The two are interchangeable. Okay, so welcome to episode 2 of Reflections. And thank you as well to everyone for the amazing feedback you gave me for the inaugural show, and reflections for those that may be new to this format that I've created. This is when I take a subject, a topic from the week, something that has happened that is of prominence, of note in the world, and then we look at it. I look at it from a more philosophical perspective, and basically kind of reflect on that, but then also as well give an example of something good or something virtuous or something positive, or someone doing some positive work in the world, or something interesting, something of wonder. So today's show, and this is a continuation on a previous conversation that I was having with my viewers about Trump and about malignant narcissism. But today's the main thrust of what we're going to talk about in terms of the topic, of course, is the tariffs. Yeah, is the tariffs. But I'm going to be essentially contrasting some elements of philosophy to give some kind of a context, philosophical context, to the things that are unfolding right now in the world, and what this could potentially mean for the future, because we really are in very historic and significant times. As many of you know, I am a Neo-Vedic astrologer, and one of the things I was been talking about for a long time was what I referred to as the Great Awakening, or the Rude Awakening, which I really feel like is actually turning out to be much more of a rude awakening. As you know, this came into full effect on March 29th, 2025. We're now in April, early April. So we are truly seeing the effects of this play out. And as you will all know, I said, guys, this is going to be bigger than COVID. And thus far, I think that has been proved to be correct. In fact, I've actually heard pundits, obviously completely not connected with my channel at all, talking about news pundits, etc., and say, look, the scenarios that we're in are actually more challenging than the COVID situation, and even 2008, the great financial crisis and recession of 2008. Because once everything is all kind of going through the wash, and the sheer consequence of everything that is happening, we are seeing effectively a change in the world order, which was something that I anticipated, and which is why I kept on repeating the phrase. And I think it makes more and more sense. It seemed abstract at the time, I'm sure, but I said this is affecting America's seat of power, its seat in the world as the predominant power, economically, militarily, of course, and of course financially, which is probably the most crucial one of all. And as we know, the dollar, the US dollar, is still the world's reserve currency. But there is now talk, such are the ructions, there are now talks that potentially the euro could be replacing the US dollar as the global reserve currency. We'll have to see what happens. Because of course, China could potentially argue that, or maybe something that has been created within BRICS. But I did warn of this time, and I said when Uranus is in sidereal Taurus, so it dipped in for about 3 months. So Uranus entered sidereal Taurus on the 1st of June 2024, stayed there for a few months, and then it then retrograded back out, stayed in Aries, and now it's back in Taurus. And all that time it's been going over the star Algol, as you guys will know, which is the star of betrayal, deceit, betrayal. beheadings, losing one's head, things being overturned. Yeah, it's the Medusa star or the demon star. And it's synonymous with treachery. So we're seeing a tremendous amount of treachery right now, particularly in regards to these tariffs and the harm that is causing the world, and essentially the insider trading which has been exposed. Yeah, where Duck L'Orange, Trump has essentially trashed the global economy, not just the US, but particularly the US in particular, but the global economy, in order to enrich himself and his friends on a level of malignant narcissism that has yet to be equaled in the entire world. I mean, it is really up there. We're getting close to kind of Caligula, Emperor Caligula proportions here, and possibly even beyond. So what I want to do is I want to reflect also on Chinese culture. Yeah, on Chinese culture, because of course, as it currently stands, Trump imposed a whole bevy of tariffs on the world, effectively. A few countries were left unscathed, except Russia, yeah, and I think Belarus, Hungary, yeah. Interesting that, but everyone else, even the penguins and the albatross, yeah, even the penguins and the albatross got a tariff. So I guess they'll be paying their tithe in herring or some kind of fish or squid, yeah. Imagine when they got the news. It's just astonishing, isn't it? But obviously the markets went into turmoil. The dollar has been weakening, and the bond markets have not been good. And the issue with the bond markets is that really does deal with the confidence, because America was seen as the safe pair of hands. Yeah. So when there was economic turmoil or financial turmoil, everyone would go into US bonds. And just in case people aren't familiar with what a bond is, essentially a bond is a fundraising. It's something national governments do to raise funds, so to raise money for spending, infrastructure, etc., stuff like that. So say America would issue a bond, and it would say, look, if you buy this bond for say $250,000, yeah, you can decide how much of bonds you buy. So America said, okay, you buy that for $250,000, say, for example, and a country, maybe Japan, China, has a tremendous amount of US bonds, and they give that money to America, and then as a reward, America will then pay a interest on that bond. And these bonds could be, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25-year bonds, yeah, and it gives a yield over time. And even though the yield is not that high, it's very stable and it's very consistent, yeah, because there is belief and there is faith that America will be able to pay that interest, yeah, be able to pay it back. What Trump has done, what Duck L'Orange has done, has shaken that faith, that global faith in America to honor its bonds, its trade agreements, etc., its seat of power. The fourth, this big eclipse, not only the eclipse, but this big stellium of 8 planets, if you include Chiron. So it was Saturn, Mercury retrograde, Venus retrograde, Neptune, and then we had Sun, Moon, Mercury was in there, and then Chiron there as well. If you count 8, yeah, 8. The COVID one was 5, if I remember. It was 5 or 6. I can't remember exactly, but it was less. This is 8. And this is leading to all sorts of ramifications, as many of you watching this video will already know. So as things currently stand, Trump raised tariffs on China to 145%. They've been frozen at a blanket 10% for everybody else. Yeah, so it started with, you remember, he got out his kind of almost Eurovision style leaderboard or tax board, holding it up as he was reading out all of these different things. I mean, 49% tariff on the Cambodians. I mean, because they have a trade deficit, as if the Cambodians are going to be buying Chrysler cars and iPhones and stuff like that, which are manufactured mainly in China, and now manufacturing is now being moved to India. Apparently, they said they've moved 600 tons of iPhones now around, and to basically try and get around the tariffs. China, when it's just so extraordinary. When Trump raised the tariffs on China to 104%, they then raised their tariffs to 84%. He then went to 145%. They've raised it to 125% tariffs. So China has got a reciprocal tariff. They said they are not going to take the tariffs any higher, because they said after this, America is just going to be ignored. And they said basically America is becoming a joke. Yeah, among other things. For China to even say that in such categorical terms is already a huge warning. Yeah, a huge warning. So here I've got my notes here, so I'm going to read through the notes to try and keep myself, on track. I want this show to be about half an hour. So someone gave me a little bit of pushback actually, which I didn't mind, but I thought it was a good way to kind of get into the other topics. So I did a YouTube short which was titled, it was Understanding Trump's Malignant Narcissism and Its Impact. Yeah, and its impact. Oops, what's happened? Oh gosh, I've done that. I forgot to turn off the internet here on my phone. I just got a notification anyway, and then I ended up turning around the camera. Anyway, so, and I think what's this? Linda Jones Artist said in the comments, everyone keeps underestimating Trump. I don't underestimate Trump. Remember, I've always said, never underestimate Duck L'Orange. He doesn't want to be a king, he wants to be an emperor. Let's at least get that straight. King is beneath his ultimate delusions of grandeur, even that he wants to make Canada the 51st state, take over Greenland, take back the Panama Canal, and expand the United States by force. Emperor is not by force. Emperor, not king. They said in capitals, not king. And that person is right. That person is right. And I replied to them, and I added a caveat. And I said, indeed, I agree. But according to Suetonius, so he is the guy that, and I'll try and drop in a picture maybe here. He wrote on the Caesars. Yeah, he wrote on the Caesars, and this is currently a best-selling book right now, which is edited by this guy. I forget, but I'll drop the picture in. And I put here, indeed I agree, but according to Suetonius, even king was a dirty word in the Roman Empire because it meant to govern the empire on whim. Yeah, we get the word emperor from imperator, which roughly translates as first citizen. To be king, according to the ancient understanding, is to govern and make choices without recourse from the state and its citizens, which Trump is doing. So the word king, I still think, is the most appropriate. Americans' governing structure is largely based on concepts of Rome and Greece to a lesser extent, which is why America has a Senate. Trump doesn't believe in any of that. He wants the privileges of a king to govern on whim. That's exactly what he's doing. Trump wants to be crowned as a king. Remember that, and I'll put here, remember the AI Times front cover, so I'll probably drop that in, where he's got himself crowned. But also wants an empire that he can do whatever he wants with at his pleasure. It's hard to believe, but even the Caesars had constraints. But what I would add to that as well, to caveat, it's true. Emperor is the highest rank. It ranks above a king. Back in the day, the say like the emperors of Rome, they would allow regional kings to still rule their kingdoms as long as they gave fealty to the emperor. Yeah, so as long as they acknowledged the emperor as the supreme power and gave fealty or maybe tributes and stuff like that, they could remain as king. This is true. So in terms of rank, in terms of power, obviously an emperor will rule over an empire. But the reason why I say Trump wants to be king, it's true, he does want to have an empire, but he wants to rule it as a king. And the king just has the ultimate authority for decision making without necessarily consulting a wide group of people. So you see how it's being projected in the propaganda that, that Trump is consulting all of these people, when really it's a cabal, it's a clique of small people, which is why, he was able to, he shorted the market in order to benefit himself and his friends. And he was there in the Oval Office boasting, saying, look, this guy here, I can't remember who he's pointing to, made $900 million. This guy here made 1.2 billion. Yeah, flaunting it. Yeah, that's what a king does. Look, me and my friends, we're so wealthy. Me and my robber barons. Yeah. An emperor, of course, can do such things, but the emperor takes responsibility for the whole empire and has to put the interests of the empire first. So one of the things that really cut, so even Caesar, who was obviously the first dictator, the first one to basically consolidate power in one person. And then you had then Augustus that came afterwards, and I'm reading through Suetonius. Fascinating, incredible how much Augustus was adored. He had his wickedness as well, but he really believed in running the state well and running the empire well. And he largely, he did. He was also generous with the people from time to time as well. Not too much largesse, but he was adored in the end. He was adored, even with these little foibles and all of this kind of stuff. He was largely adored, and this is where we actually get the name August from. It's from Augustus. They wanted to elevate him. He was basically elevated to the state of a god while he was still alive. Caesar was as well, but after he was assassinated on the Ides of March. Yeah, so you see how this all kind of dovetails in. So I'll drop a picture in if I remember. So there is a guy called Johnathan Bi, yeah, young guy. He's got a YouTube channel. And he's done a video. It's had about 250,000 views, and he talks about Rene Girard predicts US-China trade war. Yeah, and he's an 8VC fellow studying computer science and philosophy at Columbia University. So I'll put his video in the video description below, and he basically quotes Rene Girard, who basically predicted that there would be a trade war, potentially even a physical war between America and China, not because of their differences, but because they've become more similar. And then he talks about the human craving for status, influence, wealth, riches, etc. And he says one of the things he argues is that nations actually start to compete, not because they're so different, but because they have a lot of similarities in common and they want the same things, which is really, really interesting. So it really flips some of the narrative around. So I was watching that, and I really think that is worth note. So I will put him in the video description, and he is focuses on philosophy and many of the great philosophers. So I'm going to be going through more of his content as well, because we will share similar talking points. All right, now let's get over on to let's talk about Machiavelli. Yeah, Machiavelli. Basically kind of Middle Ages / Renaissance figure. Famously wrote the book called The Prince. Yeah, so here it was called Il Principe. Yeah, I've got the capstone version here. Niccolo Machiavelli. And this was, so Machiavelli is known as, he had his philosophy on the state, how a ruler should rule. So he called those rulers princes. Yeah, they could be kings, what have you. Sometimes they were generals, etc. But he used the term prince for a man who is in power of a state. And of course, the same could apply to a female as well. These, but of course we're talking about Middle Ages, but it could also apply to a female as well. Whoever was the head of state, this was his advice. Now, I've read Machiavelli, but it was a while ago. But I wanted to get to something to precise about fickleness. Fickleness, because this is what we are seeing here from Dr. Orange, from Trump. And this is why I'm saying he wants to kind of rule like a king, because kings can be fickle. Yeah, they're not thinking but this is when they're this is when you've got the sociopathic, malignant, narcissist king. But anyway, so this is what Machiavelli has to say about fickleness. Yeah, so I printed it off here so I could stay concise. All right. Machiavelli warns the prince against being fickle, because fickleness or instability in decision-making is a serious threat to the ruler's power and can lead to instability in the state. Yeah, so we are already seeing this writ large. Yeah, Trump is causing not only instability in America, but the international markets as well. Anyway, so it carries on. A fickle prince might appear weak, indecisive, and unreliable, thus losing the trust of his subjects and potentially facing rebellion. Yeah? So even though Machiavelli was talking about the arts of statecraft and saying that a prince should appear virtue but really should be duplicitous underneath, but must give the projection of virtue and stability, here he's concretely warning why fickleness is bad if you are a head of state. And then it goes into a more detailed explanation. So weakens the power base. A prince who is easily swayed by opinions or changes course frequently will appear unreliable and weak to his people. Yeah, we see this. You can see why I've focused on this area. This can erode their faith in his leadership and make them more likely to question his authority. So this is already now, for those, of course, who didn't vote for Trump, which is the vast majority of the people here, and the world didn't vote for Trump either, and we're all dealing with the ructions. But even those that voted for Trump, now, of course, the ones that are the most diabolically committed to the cult will never see it. But there are a lot of Trump voters that are regretting their vote, and they're being like, you've destroyed my 401k. Why are you doing this? Yeah, many of the independent media have been showing these people putting up their tweets and their comments on social media at their dismay. Yeah. Then it goes on, creates instability. Fickle decisions can lead to a lack of consistency in policies and actions, which can create chaos and uncertainty within the state, or as in modern times now, because we're all connected, the whole world. This can cause unrest and make it harder for the prince to maintain order. Here, next part, it goes, destroys trust. A prince who is perceived as fickle will struggle to maintain trust, both in his subjects and with other rulers. Thus, trust is essential for a prince to be able to rule effectively. So we are at this stage now where trust in America is being destroyed because of Trump's fickleness. The tariffs are on, the tariffs are off, this, that, and the other. It's now affecting the bond markets, which are one of the main indicators of trust. Everything, particularly in the modern world, but anything to do with business, commerce, finance is all based on confidence and trust. Once the trust is lost and people lose faith, yeah, which is also an element of Jupiter. This is why Jupiter deals with things to do with the economy, but Saturn deals with the economy as well, which is the rules, regulations. Once you throw out the rules and regulations and you abuse trust, people lose faith. Once they lose faith in America's ability to be able to hold to its word and pay its bills, everything is in danger of collapse. Then it also goes on to say, disrupts relationships. Fickleness can damage relationships, both personal and political. A prince who is unstable and unpredictable is likely to have difficulty building and maintaining alliances, which are crucial for survival and success. So you see, even here, even though this was written basically back in the Middle Ages, you see why Machiavelli is still referenced and read to this day, because these are eternal truths. Eternal truths. What he's saying is, even if a prince within is treacherous and not honest, he still has to project stability to his kingdom or his country or nation and those that he works with or collaborates with, because the second that he is perceived as innately fickle and doesn't know what he's doing, it destroys the faith. Yeah. So here, I'm going to read you off a bit here, which is, because this was the summary. I'll read you off here, which are some of the direct quotes. So The Prince, chapters 18 and 19, summary and analysis. And this is from Spark Notes. Chapter 19, the need to avoid contempt and hatred. A prince must avoid being hated and despised at all costs. Too late for Duck L'Orange, of course. A prince may be criticized for a lack of virtue, but he will never be hated for it. Now, isn't that interesting? Because this is very true, yeah? Obviously, there are a lot of people that hate Trump for his lack of virtue, etc., but not the people that support him, yeah? Because they believe they're going to get rich. Do you see? They've ignored his faults in character because they believe that aligning with him will benefit them, yeah? So I'll read that again. A prince may be criticized for a lack of virtue, but he will never be hated for it. However, a prince will be hated if he takes the property or women of his subjects. Yeah, now think about that. And if it says here, a prince must avoid robbing his subjects of their honor. Yeah, and I'm going to drop in a link, not a link, a screenshot, probably here, where the BBC are talking about Americans in Paris and Americans abroad in general feeling deeply shamed and embarrassed. Yeah, I'll show you the screenshot which I saw. And also as well, if you think, but he basically, however, a prince will be hated if he takes the property or women of his subjects. Now, obviously, well, I mean, you could also argue that as well with his connections with Epstein, you know, taking of women and girls, quite literally. But in terms of the property, with all of this instability, what is he doing? He's destroying the 401ks. Yeah, destroying the 401ks. That is the same as robbing people's property, yeah, to enrich himself. So I thought there was that bit there. Gosh, the time is going now. Let's talk about Confucius. Yeah, Confucius. I'll drop in a picture as well, probably here. Now, China has a 5,000-year history or more, but definitely 5,000 years. And this is what Confucius has to say about leadership. So in this passage, Confucius advises leaders to cultivate virtue and live by example, emphasizing that a ruler's moral character will ultimately influence the people they govern. He suggests that instead of relying on punishments, leaders should prioritize fostering a sense of shame and order through virtue and ritual. So in the sense of like honor, yeah, honor or dishonor. Confucius also stresses the importance of honesty and truthfulness in a leader's words and actions. So Confucius is the bedrock of Chinese philosophy. Not just China, I mean, it's been taken on by many places in the world, but it is the bedrock of Chinese philosophy. And of course, China is going to respond in that context of the background of Confucius. Do you see? Yeah, this is why it's so rare for China to insult other nations and stuff and things like that, because they believe in respect, decorum, not losing public face. Yeah, anyway. So a breakdown of it. Leading by virtue. Confucius believes that a leader's own virtuous behavior will inspire and guide the people rather than relying on strict laws and punishments. Yeah. So leading by example. Cultivating a sense of shame. He advocates for using rituals, societal norms to instill a sense of shame in individuals, encouraging them to behave appropriately and maintain order. So that might seem bad, but it means in the sense of propriety, doing the right thing, so people essentially govern themselves. Yeah, they self-edit in a way without the need for state violence. Honesty and truthfulness. Confucius emphasizes the importance of a leader being truthful and authentic in their words and actions, as this builds trust and credibility, which of course Duck Larange is destroying. Serving as a model. He suggests that leaders should be a good example for their people by demonstrating the virtues they wish to see in others. And then final answer, Confucius advises leaders to promote good people to positions of authority, not incompetence, which is a cacistocracy, which you've heard me say before, to earn the common people's respect and ensure societal stability. He emphasizes that elevating immoral or crooked individuals would lead to a loss of respect and disorder. This is Confucius. This was said 500 years or so before Christ, yeah, BC, still true to this day. So what I want to drop in is something of inspiration or wonder. I'll do something here. So there is a YouTuber, a Chinese YouTuber called Liziqi. She does extraordinary things. She's very famous throughout China and throughout the world. And in many ways, I think she, especially with veneration and respect of her grandmother, which is legendary, well known, she is in this rural kind of idyll. Now, these videos, they're highly produced, but they are fabulous. She kind of cooks things, like grows crops, cooks things from scratch, preservation, makes silk, salt and soybean oil and tofu, and she's gardening, and then she's in the mountains, and then she's gathering flowers, and then she's making dresses or doing stuff with lacquer and fixing her grandmother's wardrobe. It's really quite extraordinary stuff. And so I put here, she's famed in China all over the world, and she's returned back to YouTube after being absent for 2 years. People thought maybe the Chinese state had taken her or something like that, but it turns out maybe she just wanted a break. They've even want her to kind of basically, her videos are so, she encapsulates so many of the virtues of China. The actual Chinese government wanted to basically have her as their sort of like official mascot at one point. Not mascot, but as to promote the virtues of China. Anyway, her videos exemplify a certain sentiment of Chinese culture that is humble yet sophisticated, I've put in my notes. But the love of her grandmother really comes through, it really does. She embodies a lot of what Confucius states as virtue and respect, and what he also said as filial, what is it? Filial loyalty. So that's basically where you honor your parents, your grandparents, and your ancestors. And by doing so, that creates a more stable society. So I put up the still of Liziqi. I will put her video in there. She makes this extraordinary, what is it called? It's called Wine Table of Winding Canal. It's had 90 million views, was up 3 years ago. It's extraordinary. Just watch it. It's about 90 minutes long. She makes this table, and in the end, she's got this water thing where it's like this canal, and the food in the bowls moves around, and she's created this mountain range. It's just extraordinary and exemplifies many of the virtues of Confucianism. And we shall have to see what happens, but China has taken the gloves off, and we are in very tricky times. But there is still beauty in the world. Let's see how this plays out. But I'll leave that video there because I've already gone over my half an hour. Typical. All right. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. Like this video. It is free, and help this reach a wider audience. All right. Big love, and I'll catch you all soon. All right. Bye-bye for now. Cheers.